I am Jackie with Hub City Bookshop, and I'm here with Mark A. Turnipseed, and this is his wonderful book, My Suicide Race, Winning Over the Trauma of Addiction, Recovery, and Coming Out. And with him is Hillary Belk. So I'm just going to give a bio for each of them and then let them talk with us for a little while. They both would love to take questions from the audience, so if you have any questions, please type them in the chat window and I'll voice them. If it's to one or the other of them in particular, just note which one you'd like me to ask the question to. I'll make sure it gets to the right person. All right, so father of 2 sons and psychology graduate with 5+ years of mental health experience, Mark A. Turnipseed has now become a fitness coach and LGBTQ addiction recovery advocate, model, and speaker, and is now the author of My Suicide Race. After surviving numerous relapses connected to addictions, Mark A. Turnipseed found a surprising key to saving his own life. While training for a triathlon, he discovered a way to embrace a fresh commitment to sober health. Offering hope for all who struggle with the shame and self-hatred that fuel addictions, Mark shines a new light on the often unseen links between addiction, suicide attempts, and the trauma of coming out. Hillary Belk, CADC and CLC, is a grateful and empowered woman in recovery. She has been in active recovery since July 10th, 2008. Hillary helped pioneer college-age recovery in the state of North Carolina. Belk is an entrepreneur and started Hillary Belk Recovery Support Services in 2019. She has a background in substance use counseling, life coaching, recovery coaching, and is a Reiki practitioner. She has worked with every demographic and loves to celebrate individuality and uniqueness. She is a bisexual woman and is proud to be part of the LGBTQ+ community. Hillary spends time laughing, barefoot, and outdoors. Her family and friends hold very high priority in her life. Hillary also enjoys focusing on self-care and finding new and innovative ways to help others. She is a very spiritual woman and knows her understanding of God is at the center of everything in her life. And we are so grateful to have both of them here today, and they have been so open and fun to talk to while we were waiting for you guys to come in, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation with you.
Thank you, Jackie. I appreciate the warm welcome and the conversation before. And thank you so much for inviting us to do this. I really appreciate it. As a self-published author, it's just such an honor to be able to engage with an audience like this. It's something that's so special to me. It's something that I didn't foresee ever happening when I first started this journey. So it's just exciting. Watching everything unfold has just been, it's been so beautiful. And so thank you. It's a huge gift that you're giving me to be able to share my story tonight. And Hillary, thank you so much for joining us. Hillary, everybody, is a very special person to me. A lot of people don't know my storyline, but last year I actually just moved down to Asheville, and I moved down not knowing anybody in the world of mental health or recovery. And I moved down in the COVID crisis. So I was kind of like, what am I going to do? Who am I going to meet? How am I going to survive? You know, I didn't have a system of support at all. And so I ran into a bookstore and let them know that I was an author and I was creating this book. It still wasn't created yet. And the bookstore clerk, she said, I have a friend, Hillary Belk, you need to give her a call. And so I gave Hillary a call, and then she has connected me with the community of mental health and recovery up here. And it's just been such a blessing because, you know, prior to my recovery, I have always had a problem with tapping in, with connecting with people. I was always the person who kind of isolated and, you know, pulled myself as far away from other people as possible. And so moving to a place, this was my first time ever moving alone without my family. And I was very, very scared. And, but I knew if I just started tapping in, started talking to people, started saying like, hey, here's me, like, let's get together, let's have some coffee, then something would work out. And luckily, Hillary came within a couple of hours, basically, of me moving into my apartment. And then we were able to connect. So thank you, Hillary, and thanks for coming on tonight. So basically, guys, I'm going to talk a little bit about my book, This is actually my first book event. The other events that I have been doing are more so like stories. They've been asking me to share my story. This one though is quite an honor because you guys have are interested in the actual book, and you some of you guys may have purchased the book. Some of you may have listened to the book. I recorded the audio book, which was like mind blowing. That was a lot of fun. And some of you may have read the ebook. Whatever way that you've connected with it, I really appreciate it. It's such a blessing to know that people out there are reading the story and hopefully taking, some of the tidbits here and there, the morsels that I try to offer up and try to give to this world, and spreading that into their relationships and, their functions. May it be business, may it be family. A lot of people have reached out to me who have who've read the book, and they have family members suffering with addiction, and it has just been heartwarming to hear that some of this is now bringing hope. Um, so this is a little bit different for me. I've never actually had my book sitting beside me, tabbed with some parts that I'm going to read, but I would like to read some of it for you guys. And I also want to talk a little bit about the writing process, and that's something that I don't talk about with other people. But the writing process for this book has been extremely special. It has been a huge um, it has been a huge process. It wasn't me sitting down and going, okay, I'm going to write a book, right? These pages didn't come that way. These pages, and it wasn't after the fact. So this book to me represents something more living. It was a very like the end of this book was literally when I published it. That was like the time that I was actually going through it, right? So to me, this book was kind of like a journal. It was me expressing where I was in this process of going through recovery. And that process took me quite a long time. And as it does with a lot of people, I had been trying to get into recovery for quite some time. I mean, since I was like 15 years old, and I kept falling and stumbling and not being able to figure it out. Well, it wasn't actually until I started the process of sharing my story openly and honestly that I was able to fully start grasping some of the things about recovery. And so I hope that the readings that I share today kind of like illuminate the that process of me at first living a life completely inundated with lies to the point that I didn't even know or trust the person who I was. So when I actually started getting sober, honestly, I didn't, and you'll see this in the reading. I didn't, I couldn't even believe anything that was going on inside of my head. Right? I got to this point where I was so hopeless, where I couldn't believe any of the thoughts about myself, right? May they be good or may they be bad. I basically got to this point where I was like, you know what? I'm finally just going to listen to other people. I'm just going to believe some other people. And I know that might sound a little bit scary because other people don't always have your best nature in mind or your best hope in mind, but I decided to connect with the people who did have my best interest in mind and believe what they were saying about me, that I was worthy of love, that I had potential. And ultimately, at some point, they were the ones who began saying, "You should write a book," because that web started to grow. So it's been it's been a fun little process. So I've felt like this story and this book, especially the book, but initially the story. Hold on, I'm needing to change my view because I keep watching Rebecca. Hey, Rebecca. For some reason, Rebecca turns full screen on my view, but now I'm here with all of you guys, and this is perfect. That was fun. Um, so anyway, yeah, this book at some point it turned into something that was larger than my story. It and when it did, it became more it became something that I detached from, and I realized, okay, this is no longer my story. Rather, this is my responsibility. It's now my responsibility to share with the world what's going on with me. And I felt like it was kind of like at a perfect time. One, because it was in COVID and we were all like, ah, but two, there was a lot of things, a lot of cultural movements going on in the world at that time when it came to LGBTQ, the opioid crisis. Suicide was on this brand new rise, and there was all these elements that kind of like connected with pieces of my book and pieces of my story. And I was like, oh my God, like this actually has potential to really potentially help some people. And it was at that point where the writing process changed from me telling my story to telling a or like having a mission and having a purpose. And at that point, it actually stopped being work. It wasn't hard anymore. It only took a couple of months once that really hit to finally come up with the book as it is. Um, so when I first started writing about this story and sharing it as a story, it actually was a blog. I don't know if you guys know that, but it started out as a blog called Trials to Triathlon. And this was a little bit over 3 years ago. So 3 years ago, I was happily married with a woman, and we had just had a baby, and I had just had a series of serious relapses. And in the book, if you have read the book, you will see that those relapses were happening because I wasn't fully invested, one, in my recovery, but two, in the lies and the clutter. I wasn't willing to finally give in. I wasn't willing to finally listen to the people around me, saying like, this is you, we see you, like we love you. You don't have to be so scared. Just open up. We want to be there. We want to be there for you. And so those relapses led me to this spot, this tipping off point where I was just like, you know what? Okay, I'm going to listen to other people now. I'm going to listen to what you guys have to say about me. And the first was that you're able, was that you're strong, like you have potential in your life. And I go, you know what? If I have potential, then I need to prove it to myself, and I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to start training for a triathlon. And so that's what it was. I got into the pool, started training for a triathlon. And the next thing I knew was that triathlon and the training began to um, really stress me out to a point that it began to kind of mimic things that stress me out with addiction. And I saw the parallels coming on, and I was like, holy cow, like I need to start writing about this. And so there began the writing process of Trials to Triathlon. I had no idea where it was going to go. I just wanted to share with people that recovery was similar to trying to train your body. Trying to train your spirit and your emotional health in recovery was similar to going through something like an Ironman training, which to me, honestly, an Ironman training was like otherworldly. It was something that I absolutely didn't believe was like human possible. And so hopping in, and same with recovery, I just absolutely did not believe that it was humanly possible. And so, the wonderful thing about those first couple articles is I began to develop belief. I began to develop belief that, oh my goodness, if I do these training plans, then I can eventually walk across the line and with my head held high of a triathlon. And I was like, oh my God, that would be incredible. And I realized at that same exact time, I was like, and that also means if I follow like what these people are trying to tell me to do in recovery, that I actually might be able to go into a grocery store without getting booze. I might be able to go a full day without taking Xanax, and I had not really experienced a life free of drugs and alcohol since I was very young, about 12 years old. And besides the multiple stints of rehab that I had, but still during those times, there was always some way of escape. And so even before I started my drug and alcohol stuff, there was always a sense of escape. And why would I want to escape? I think that leads a lot of people into the drugs and alcohol is a need to escape. Um, but what led me into the need to escape was a sense of shame. Basically, I had a life that was filled with shame from a very, very early age. And there are some people in recovery who don't necessarily go through the shame aspect, and they got there because the partying got too much fun, and got over their heads, and they became physically addicted. My party was never actually fun. My party was always to escape, and it was always to run away. I was the drunk who really enjoyed to go to that dark, dingy bar and sit in the corner where I could write my poetry and be miserable and think like very sad things about life. So actually, a lot of the poetry that I'm producing now is, if you've looked at my website, My Best Gay Self, then a lot of that poetry is actually from that dark, dark time. But it's been very fun for me to relive and bring it out to the public. Kind of like some of the stuff in this book has been very fun for me to relive. Now, well, I don't know. It wasn't always very fun to relive. There were some very challenging moments, and there were times when there was like seasons of this writing process where my ex-wife was just like, "You need to go be alone because you are just mean," because this was bringing out a lot of trauma, right? It was reliving a lot of trauma that before I had run away from. But once I committed to writing it into a book, I could no longer run away from it. And it was very good that I couldn't run away from it, because what running away did to me was cause me to end up going back out and drinking and using drugs. So, the process was quite beautiful. The pressure, and then the friendships and the encouragement along the way have just been huge. Um, so back to that shame aspect. The shame aspect is kind of where I want to take off, because the shame aspect is what led me to start living a life that was really built on a foundation of lies. And that is ultimately what I came up with as the introduction. Now, this introduction was not always the introduction. I actually wrote most of this book while I was still married and still in the closet. And I actually was not planning on coming out of the closet. I was planning on keeping it all a lie. And the book was a completely different order, and it was titled Trials to Triathlon. And I think I look back on that and I'm just like, I can't believe that I wrote like a good portion of this under the guise of a lie. Well, I got to the point where after I had finished the race and after I had basically finished writing the book, I realized that this book was not complete. I realized that I had been living an absolute lie, and there I had this decision. I was like, you know what? I'm going to throw away this book. I'm going to like delete all the files in my computer. I'm going to give up, and I'm going to go back out and drink like tomorrow. That was where my head was at. And and I was so frustrated because the book wasn't coming together. It wasn't right. And I was just like, why isn't it right? Well, because you're living this lie. and and so what I did there, I was like, okay, then I've got to just come out. And so I came out, and then when I came out, then I posted that onto my Trials to Triathlon website. And that's when people were like, holy cow, wait, this story just got a whole bunch deeper. And then I got reached out to by a best-selling book author up there in Evergreen, Colorado, where I was living. And he took the manuscript that I had, and he was like, let's let's revisit this. You need to absolutely rewrite this entire book under the guise that under the, foundation of the fact that you've been living an entire lie. And so he invited me to live in his basement, and I lived in his basement and rewrote my book. And then it was a crazy process. I can't believe I. So he gave me a call when I was actually about to just leave Colorado and just start driving. I had packed up all my belongings and was about to leave. I had nowhere to go. COVID had happened, and he called me and said, "Come to my house. We have a basement apartment, and I want you to stay there." And so things like that, happen started to happen to me and continue to happen to me after I finally accepted myself and stopped living lies. And that's why I ended up writing this introduction that says, and now I'm going to read. Introduction. My lies began when I was 6 years old, and throughout my childhood and many years of my adult life, I tried to build a house on a foundation of those lies. So, this book is for all the liars out there, especially the ones who think they have it all figured out. It is for the liars who think they are the shit and the ones who believe they're no good. It's for the family man or mother who doesn't believe their son looks up to them, and for the gay man or woman who thinks they can't tell the truth about who they are. It's for the people who love those liars and who have been hurt by those lies. For far too long, my lies called pain and tears to those I loved. As you continue reading, you'll learn about my lies and my addictions, substances that allow me to avoid pairing actions and consequences together, substances that put me in a black hole where morals didn't exist, making it possible for me to bypass the experience of remorse. I now recognize that my first impulse was to shove guilt under the rug and act out in anger and frustration because I was so scared my lies would be found out, that my true identity would be revealed. I thought, people will know I'm a drug addict. People will know I'm a thief. People will know I'm a hedonist. And the scariest of all is people will know I'm gay. Melody Beattie, one of my favorite authors, dissects the difference between guilt and shame in her book, The Art of Letting Go. She describes guilt as the feeling that what we did wasn't okay, but shame is the feeling that who we are isn't okay. Um, that is just it's chilling for me to reread some of this stuff. And so like doing the audiobook was it took me actually 3 days to read, because going through stuff like that just kind of brings up a lot of emotions and starts to make me tear up, because that experience, like when I wrote down, um I remember writing this line and just sitting there and crying. um the line that people will know I'm a drug addict, people will know I'm a thief, like those things were tiny. But the scariest of all is that everybody was going to know that I'm gay. What right when I give this book out, everybody is going to know it. And I was writing this in that basement, and I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to come out to my parents. I'm going to have to come out to my friends. I'm going to have to come out to all my ex-girlfriends. And I was just, oh, it was very, very hard and very scary. And but like I said, at that point, I had kind of realized that I had to detach from this. It was now my responsibility to share it. And so there was no turning back for me. it was just keep on writing. And so every day I just kept on writing and kept on writing. Um, so yeah, my life was built on a foundation of lies. And I want to go into my first lie. I remember my first lie like it was yesterday, and it was when I was 6 years old. I think I was six. I was pretty close to that. I don't remember that necessarily, but I do remember the exact moment that it was. I was driving down the road with my mom. We were headed from Atlanta down to Sea Island, and we were going to go visit the beach. And I was sitting there, my head was hot, my skin was clammy, I was all nervous because a week before that, I had been molested by my cousin, and he was a boy. And I knew kind of, sort of, that like AIDS and boys went together. And so I was just sitting there very, very scared. And so I blurted out, Mom, how do people get AIDS? So y'all, this is back in 1996, right? When like the AIDS crisis was just starting to boom and starting to get a lot of media. And my mom responded, she goes, "Is that damn TV, scaring my little boys about AIDS? You have no reason to be worried about having AIDS. You are going to be just fine because only boys who like other boys have AIDS." And I was like, "Uh-oh." And if you do like other boys, you're going to hell anyway, and you're a Christian, so you don't have that problem. You don't ever have to worry about it. Well, bam, like then I all of a sudden fear, like just that big, came into my life. The first time that I had ever really feared anything. And I was like, oh my God, what do I do about this? And the the world around me seemed to sharpen and close in, and the sound of our minivan's engine became a distant echo as fearful thoughts took resident in place of actual experience. My brain felt as though it was slowly swelling up. I felt dizzy and more than a little squeamish. Memories from the basement beauty pageant played out in my head, paralyzing me and making me feel cold and lonely. I no longer felt comfortable and secure around my mother. I had lost her as a safety net. I was on my own, curiously and fearfully speechless. I had never been so alone, but I knew rather quickly that this was a solace for me, a new home and a new form of freedom that would keep me safe. My mind calmed down as a little lie came to me and slid from my lips, innocently cutting through time and becoming a new habit. My first lie. She had asked me, why are you concerned about AIDS? And I said, oh, I'm just wondering how someone like Magic Johnson got it. I didn't share with her that a week prior that I had been with another boy, and that's why I was scared. I seriously do wonder, where my life would have gone had that lie not have ever taken place, and I think that um, a lot of people ask me, what can we do differently? And I think that our culture is actually doing it differently already, because that would not have probably been coming out of my mother's mouth, the fact. And I know that that still is happening, but the fear around being gay, or the fear around even being, just a little bit queer or being a little bit different, that type of stuff, like, is starting to not exist. It's starting to be more accepted. And I'm so very, very, very excited to be witnessing that in our lifetime. And I hope and pray that my kids get to experience more and more of that, and that they get to carry on this story to other people as well, and say, my dad did it, like we can do it too. Because ultimately, when I was between, like, whether I could drink or drug, or it was like, if they did it, I can do it too. if 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 he came out, then I can do it too. And so I'm hoping that this type of story leads to that type of effect as well. And so later on, as the lies continued in my life. I had built up this whole life of lies, and it was absolutely frustrating and horrible. And then I ended up at a youth treatment home, and a little boy named Ryan was introduced to me. So he came into this youth treatment home. And the first thing that you did when you came into this youth treatment home was that you shared your story. And he shared, well, my parents sent me here because I came out as gay. The boys looked around and smirked, and I twisted uncomfortably in my chair. They are both very strong Christians, and my dad is like the strongest firefighter man who has a masculine aura that makes Thor seem pusillanimous. Ryan had a vocabulary that was robust, but not yet mature. They sent me here because they couldn't handle raising a boy who is gay. The people in their church would disown them, and I would ruin everything. And it would take a few days for this to really settle in, but I would eventually let everyone in the group home know about me too. I could no longer hide who I truly was inside, and they weren't going to let me go on to be the person I believed I was. So I divulged the dirties to them. Unfortunately, to them, there was a cure to it. And so we went through kind of like conversion therapy. Let's pray the gay away. And that, of course, led me to actually kind of believing that that was working. I kind of believed that my gay was going to be healed. And um and so when I got out of that program and started to become my own adult, I realized that it kind of wasn't. And there was a time where I did try to come out again. I tried to come out while I was on a whole bunch of hallucinogens, and then I covered it up as being fake. And I said I was just high, I'm actually not gay. And then Ryan came down to visit me. He came down all the way from Washington, and he came to visit me. And I introduced him to drugs and alcohol then. So he had been in rehab because he was gay, but now I was introducing him to drugs and alcohol. And when he came down, it was a beautiful, beautiful time because we also got to experience each other on this deeper, intimate level. It was the first time that I was ever able to connect with another boy on that amount of intimacy. So being in that youth home, we knew that we loved each other as brothers, right? As Christian brothers, but we didn't really know that we loved each other the way that we really did until that visit. And so he came down, and of course he was open out at the time with his parents and with my parents, and it was our plan to come out together. It was our plan that he was going to go back to Washington, and we were going to continue talking, continue our romance, and he was going to help me start coming out to my family and my friends. And I was finally going to start living free. I was about 18 years old at this time, and I was headed off to college. Well, Ryan called me up one day, and he said, Mark, I've got this little pack of drugs. I want you to take it while I take it. And it's like ayahuasca, and it sends us up into an experience that we can be tripping together so we can be together again. And I was like, what a great idea. But I didn't do it at the time that he was wanting to do it. And I told him that I would, and I didn't. And that led to what happened here. I was at a music festival instead of doing the drugs with him, and the music festival was long and hard on the mind and the body, causing me to sleep for a few days after we got back. Then a phone call came while I was relaxing, probably watching a movie. I don't remember who it was on the other end of the phone, but the news left me broken. Ryan was in a coma. He had taken a psychedelic drug along with a mix of prescription pills and was on life support. It was most likely the same concoction we were going to take together. I should have called to let him know that I wouldn't be taking the drugs until the following weekend. I was beyond heartbroken, and it's still hard to forgive myself. It was just a few weeks before they took him off of life support. My love had died, and my secret with him, it would be years before I let the word gay come back out of my mouth. I wouldn't joke about it. I got so homophobic that I wouldn't even be in the same room as another person who was gay. If I saw a gay person walking on the street, I was walking completely the different way. It was a miserable way to live, and and it led to me really fully like investing in my lies. Like there was absolutely no way at this point with this much pain that it was ever going to come out. And so then I really developed this new experience that I was above it, that I was now healed from it. You know, I almost felt like that pain had healed me from it. And so for the next years that I talk about in the book, that is me running around thinking that I'm healed from something that's so deep inside true that it led me to just using and abusing drugs, alcohol, sex, led me to prostitution, eventually to heroin, which was like the ultimate escape. And I remember every time that I was shooting up, I was just like, if this kills me, I'm fine with that. Like, I want to die. That's what I want because I can't live. You know, I mean, living in that much of a lie, there is no life to it. And then my first son came along and I realized that, man, I got to figure stuff out. So then things started to kind of happen and I ended up checking myself into rehab shortly after I got divorced from my ex-wife, um, because I had been drinking and using Xanax so much that I was getting abusive. So she left me, and then I went and checked myself into rehab, and I tried to get clean. And then I tried to come out again shortly after that rehab. And when I did, I got so filled with fear again that I ended up clamming back up inside. And um, and I clammed up for the next couple of years. I didn't get back onto heroin and opiates, but I did end up to a spot where I was drinking literally from 6 a.m. all the way until I was absolutely passed out. And I was taking so much Xanax that, I mean, it was a miserable life for about 2 years. And then I had a serious concussion. And then my cousin came out and introduced me to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I, of course, had kind of been there for court order stuff before, but I hadn't really learned about it. But I knew while we went on a walk, and I remember him looking down at the ground and going, "Oh my God, that flower is so beautiful." And I was in such a state where I was so lost inside of myself that I literally don't think I had heard or thought of the word beautiful in a couple of years. And I had just been trying to drink myself into disability. That's the spot that I was. And when I heard him say that a little flower was beautiful, this grown man said, little flower was beautiful. I go, whatever it is that this guy has, I want it. And if he can do it, then I can too. And so I started going to a program every single morning at 7 a.m. and trying to get whatever they had. But I was not willing to actually come out with my lies. And ultimately, you know, just being a little bit sober led me to being attractive. Another woman came into my life and we got pregnant and had a baby. And then the lies caught back up to me because this woman, like, she really brought out the best in me and she really shined a light into places of my life that I knew I was like almost backed into a corner. I was like, oh my God, like I'm going to have to actually go through with this. I'm going to actually have to get sober. I'm going to actually have to start living this program. And it scared the living daylights out of me. And that is where we end up with the trials to triathlon. As I freaked out, I started having relapses, and then I started training for the triathlon. Now, the triathlon to me was, like I was saying, it was so stressful that it ended up leading me to confronting three different fears, right? Three different fears that would ultimately finally allow me to break through this bondage of lies that I had been living. Like the lies were there, but the fears were what kind of held it, you know, it held it together. And that first fear was the fear of who I was, right? And so I started believing in what other people say. I started believing that other people believed that I could be better than the person that I was putting myself out to be. And then as I started to believe that, I started to begin to like actually become an athlete and be like, oh my gosh, I can run. Like people said that I could do it, but I could do it. And then, I started being sober and I was like, oh my gosh, people have been saying I could do it and now I can do it. But then it led to my fear of intimacy. So the fear of actually letting somebody in and letting somebody know that I actually need a little bit more help. Just knowing who I am, like knowing that I'm able isn't enough. I need a little bit of help. And so that had been, a big part of why I kept failing in recovery was because I couldn't trust somebody and ask them for help. And turns out I let other people in, and one thing led to the next, and I was able to finally start recovery. Not only that, I let a coach in and I was able to actually do a triathlon, and I was like, there's magic here. And then what ended up happening from that was actually trusting, actually having faith that these people had my best interest in mind. So my fear of faith was seriously put to the test over a couple of years that I talk about in that book while training for a triathlon. And that fear of faith was really what was going to actually hold me back from finally coming out if I didn't just believe that God had his best interest in mind. If I finally just lived the human that he created me to be, that things would work out, that things would not only work out, but things would thrive. And that is where we kind of end. Because when I came to that realization and I saw it in other people in my life, other people in recovery. Also, I had just watched the Rocket Man movie with Elton John, and I had just saw Bohemian Rhapsody, and I saw that when these people lived their truth, they didn't only like start living, they were fabulous. Like they lived a magical life and they helped thousands of people. And that was only once they started actually living their truth. And that kind of wraps me around full circle to where we started. Because at that point, then I started going, okay, it is time to finally realize what this race actually was. And this race was against the person who I had become because of all my lies. I've got to kill that person so that I can finally become the person that I was meant to be. And that race really showed, it really was a suicide. It really was me putting to death that when I crossed that finish line, I realized this was me putting to death that old person who I had been, and I could no longer live in those lies anymore. And so, with that, I think that I would love to open it up to some questions. Hillary came armed with some artillery, I do believe. So let's hear it.
All right. So thank you so much, Mark. Oh my gosh, it was absolutely amazing. And I just have enjoyed so much reading your book and just hearing about all the different obstacles you have overcome and the foreshadowing between, doing the triathlons and the recovery piece and also, fully coming out as well. And that kind of brings me to, and we see this a lot in addiction and in being our authentic selves, and it's like this idea where we have these misconceptions about what that's going to look like versus when the reality of it happens,
Mm,
and the stark difference that actually occurs between those two things, like the how we conceptualize it versus this is
totally.
actually how it's unfolding. So just to kind of talk a little bit more about like how it started with this conceptualization of what it would be like versus more about the reality of how it's been. You know?
Yeah, recovery to me, I started early on. I started saying that these group meetings were a playground. I said this is a playground for me to test things out and see how they go, and then I can do them out in real life. And so I started being honest in those meetings just to see like, oh wait, are people going to like shun me? And then they didn't, and instead they gave me a hug, and I was like, holy cow, wait a second. And then I realized, and I started doing that with my friends and family. So, the program of Alcoholics Anonymous leads you to making, amends with people of past harms. And I thought that people were going to shun me and kill me and come after me, but nobody did. Like everything was extremely anticlimactic. So as those experiences started to build on themselves, I started to realize that those conceptions that you speak of were absolutely false, and they were dreamt up in my head, and that ended up building up a lot of confidence. So when it came time to me coming out, that's why I ended up coming out to that group of adult men in the Alcoholics Anonymous program, was because they were like my test people. They were where I was going to finally enact my greatest act, my play on my playground. And so I came out to them, and again, it was anticlimactic and it was beautiful. And I was like, oh my God, tomorrow I'm going to call my parents and I'm going to start rewriting this book.
Absolutely. And did Rebecca have a question? Did she have her hand up?
Rebecca said she accidentally hit the button. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for asking.
Absolutely.
I do have a couple of questions though, but I can wait.
Go ahead, Rebecca, for sure.
It's so interesting though, this whole thing, because I reached out to Mark and I told him that I was not stalking him, which is like probably freaked him out anyway that I even said that. But I'm from Atlanta and I ended up in North Carolina. Now I'm on the other side. I'm on the coast, and started triathlon in my recovery, and 16 years ago. And it's just what I find, I was so sick though at the end, that when I've been reading his book, and I'm by the way, I'm in chapter 25, Ava. So that's where I'm at, Mark.
Oh,
so
it's about to get
yeah,
fun
so
for you.
we'll see what happens next. But what I was blown away by as a person who was an alcoholic, okay, that I didn't have problems with drugs, thank God, but certainly drank way too much wine. I mean, 24/7 towards the last 3 months, it was bad. And I was just astounded how you could go in and out of, your addiction and then not end up in the hospital, or get in the car and go pick up Dan at the airport, or, I was like, how is he doing this? How are you maintaining, did you just get lucky? Or did you ever end up like in detox or the hospital?
So there was a lot of encounters with police. I've been in jail multiple times. So in a lot of those cases, they probably saved my life. Also, Hunter S. Thompson and Jim Morrison were my role models. And so I believed like I was them when I was in those states of driving around on a head full of acid and stuff. Like I believed that, and like somehow that gave me this sense of like strength or something, I don't know. But then I would get arrested and or end up in the hospital after overdosing. So those events did happen. Why I was able to live through them, I have no idea. But I know that the reason that I am able to, or that gives me reason to share my story. That gives me more of a sense of responsibility to share my story, because I don't believe that I should have lived. There were things that happened that I do not believe that I should have lived from. And I'm very blessed. And unfortunately, a lot of people did not make it through as unscathed.
Right. Well, we're glad you're here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Rebecca. Let's see. So my next question, I was thinking about it because you were talking about as you started writing, you kind of started having the trauma responses going back into your story, right? I'm curious as to if there was anything you saw in your story that you had never seen before from this perspective of writing it.
Yeah. Most of this story was actually like walking through a very foggy forest where all I could see in front of me was the ground of the next step, and I would write it. And that's why the blog was, it was literally, it felt like me just like throwing up on the page like what was there for that day. And then the next day would come up with something completely new. And um I think that a lot of people go through that same sort of process through therapy, right? But I had not gone through that process with therapy, and that might have been because I was so trained and schooled in it. And I was a counselor myself at the time that I was just like, and so, and psychology and the mental life has always come kind of natural to me, like connecting with that aspect of being. And so, it's, so a lot of the trauma that ended up coming up in that book, I had no idea that I was going to, I had no memory of it. I'd forgotten completely about Minnie Mouse. And for those of you who don't know, Minnie Mouse played a big role because right along that same time when I was 6 years old, we went to Disney World and they asked me what gift I wanted, and I picked Minnie Mouse. And I said, boys can't have Minnie Mouse. And now I've got a couple Minnie Mouses in my house. Um, and they mean so much to me because boys and men can have Minnie Mouse. But no, I like that trauma. I did not really remember the trauma from my cousin. I did not remember the other rapes, like the other rapes that had happened besides the most recent one in my life. The other ones were kind of, they were gone. Like I didn't really, I had forgotten completely about them until I got to that point in my book where I was like, oh my gosh, I have to write about that. Like that has something to do with this. And I would write about it and I would experience it. And unfortunately, I wish that my ex-wife could share. She has a story of her own watching me experience that stuff. Like she put up with so much that it would have been so helpful to have, a counselor to help us go through that. And I'm eternally, that's why I dedicated the book to them, because they are freaking warriors to have survived this. Like I my luck of surviving overdoses and stuff pales in comparison to the strength that they have for surviving this story.
Absolutely, for enduring. Thank you so much for answering that. I think Rebecca's got her hand up.
Oh, yeah, I see a hand.
Rebecca, did you have another question?
Yeah, sorry about that. I was muted. An interesting thing that I find in your story was that you said when you started training for your first triathlon, I'm assuming it's your first, that it brought on a lot of stress and, it almost paralleled, I guess, addiction for you. And I have, there's, as we all know, there's a lot of people in triathlon who have history of addiction and also struggle with that component of it. I found it the opposite for me, which was it was a huge release. Like I could almost understand why somebody was a cutter, because thank God I never did that. But like I would just go harder and harder and harder, and that would be my release, my next release, my next release. How did you, so for me, I'm older and have 3 autoimmune diseases, and so I'm having to give up triathlon, which is okay. I'm very okay with that. It's been a journey. Do you rely on it anymore for your basis of feeling whole or in your recovery? I'm always curious about how, you know what I'm saying about, because
Totally.
my journey with releasing it, if you will, releasing it with care and respect, but understanding where I am at my age and cannot really, well, I am going to go back and do a sprint, which is really funny because I have done Ironman and a couple of times, and I've done halves, and
Yeah,
Now
let
I'm
me,
just, can I even get us through a sprint? I mean, no
yeah,
kidding. So
yeah. Before I get sidetracked, let me try to answer that question because that is a
yeah,
wonderful question. And what I mean by it stressing me is metaphorically. So it stressed me
right.
physically in ways that that drug and alcohol recovery was stressing me spiritually and emotionally. And I started to pair the two together. So I started to
Mm,
realize that that growing in strength athletically was similar to growing in strength when it came to spiritually. Now, what you talk
mhm,
about with the release aspect of it, I too experienced very much so. And a lot of my later writings, I write about that. And actually, Integrity Endurance, my program that I've created, the curriculum for addicts is designed around kind of pulling that back in, because what happened to me when I first started training for triathlons is it became an addiction,
mm,
is that it
mhm,
became my release. It became a place where I had my self-worth. And then I started treating people in my life horrible when they would get in my way of my training. And I
mhm,
realized at that point, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the same as I'm addicted to triathlon. I'm addicted
mhm,
to
mhm,
working out. And like other people in my life are just in my way, the same way that they were with drugs and alcohol. And that's why I started a program called Try for Youth Sobriety, is I
mm,
realized that in recovery, what I had done was I took the things in recovery, and they tell you to do service work and they tell you to help people. And I was like, maybe if I apply that to my triathlon, then it won't become another addiction. And so I took the triathlon out of myself and started giving back. And that is actually
mhm,
really when I started really writing, because it was also me sharing my story and me getting out and me using it for a higher purpose. And that is ultimately what my program Integrity Endurance is about to get people to start moving, and then to get them to find a goal, and then to get them to help them build a charity and to start giving back, and then to
mhm,
learn how to give back in other ways, and develop a system of support. So I'm super happy that you brought that up, because
mhm,
it's a highly debated topic too. Didn't you just
mhm,
trade one addiction for the other? And I say no, absolutely not. At first I did, but then I realized that I could use triathlon instead of running away from my addictions to run with my fear, to run with my self
mhm,
problems, and to find out even more and to dive even deeper into what my problems were. And ultimately, triathlon would end up me going through things like shaving my legs, which you're about to enter into that part of the book, where triathlon really started to help and pull me to this place of like accepting myself and giving me the strength to finally do that. And now I actually haven't trained for a triathlon now in over a year, because my last one, Santa Rosa, was canceled. And I thought that I was going to freak out, but I really had no problem not training. I've been just doing, strength based workouts. My workout time has decreased a lot, but I have, it's been a very wonderful process to spend time. I don't
mhm,
know if I would have been able to complete the book if I was still training like I had been, and so it gave me time to finish the book and now develop this this modeling thing too that started going on. So this a whole bunch of stuff has happened since I kind of put down triathlon for a time being. And I am actually very excited. I just joined a tri club down in Florida, but they said that you don't have to actually do triathlons. But I'm excited to be involved with that community. And I don't
mhm,
know if I'll ever go back into doing Ironman or half Ironman again, but I do know that I will probably always do little sprints in Olympics, because
mhm.
I absolutely love them. But the other ones are pretty all encompassing into life. And so it's very hard to focus on some other things right now that are going on, like me building that program of Integrity Endurance, which is like me taking this book and turning it into practice. And so that's where my focus is right now. And modeling has become also a platform upon which that I can spread hope about this type of stuff. It's become my platform for LGBTQ awareness, and to finally like strip away the shame and be able to take off your shirt. Like, to me, that is absolutely huge. Like, being in front of a camera, that's absolutely huge. And so it's a wonderful, it's just like all this stuff is just absolutely beautiful.
Hillary, I think if you and Mark, it's 7, but we've been having a really great conversation. I just wanted to read a comment that I got privately messaged, because I think this really, it resonates with a lot of people. And Mark, I just also wanted to add, most authors who write very well don't speak as well as you do and connect as deeply. And you almost made me cry several times during your conversation. And it was just so touching. No, in a good way. Like, it was just so touching to hear you tell your story. Thank you. And this person says, thanks, Mark, for an amazing talk. My best friend took her life before Christmas after secretly battling similar struggles to yours. I tuned in to better understand what her mindset could have been and why she never shared her struggles. Your talk really resonated with me because it gave me a better understanding of why she essentially went through life without the courage to be her true self. She feared rejection and religious backlash from family. Thanks for sharing your story because I'm sure it will help many people. I'm on a journey to better educate myself so that I can help others who may be struggling in isolation.
That is the type of response that, you know, makes this this whole process, reliving all those pains, and, you know, doing things like this talk, it makes it all worth it. You know, it really brings meaning and purpose to the work that I do. So thank you, whoever shared that. Thank you so much. I get a lot of those types of responses, and it just absolutely fuels my flame, gives me so much energy. I can't wait to go down to Florida and start really busting ass and really trying to help a lot of people and trying to put this thing into motion and make big things happen. And really, I mean, maybe not huge things, but even if my program ended up touching one life, you know, that's huge to me. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark. Just on that, I would like you and Hillary, if you don't mind, to just address this really quick before we get off. When we're talking about connecting with other people who share similar stories, that emotional weight that you potentially take on from hearing all these stories, how do you handle that in a healthy way? I would love to hear that from both you and Hillary.
Hillary, you can go first.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much for the question. It's, it's been it's one of those things, right? Where you're living in it, and over time you start to feel where you need to check yourself. You need, for me, I know I've gone back to therapy over the years to just do check-ins and make sure I'm okay, because to be able to be effective in helping other people and being such a intricate person in people's lives and their journeys, to this, the path of healing, if you will, it's just so important for us to continue to work on our health and wellness. So I do that through meditation. I do that through continuing to ask for help. I do it through when stuff is beyond my scope, right? And like bringing more people into like, when we have like healing teams, if you will, right? Like a group of people supporting somebody, so that weight doesn't fall on one person's shoulders as well, is a big part of that. And I think the most important thing as professionals is for us to continue to talk about it together, right? Where we can hold each other accountable with what's going on with us, because this is something that's huge. For burnout and compassion fatigue is very, very real for us. And so it's extremely important to recognize it And for me, I know I had to experience burnout to really understand the importance of continuing that self-care path, where not just giving, but also the gift of receiving as well.
Thanks, Hillary.
Yeah.
So what Hillary just described is like a whole year of work that you do in programs for psychology and counseling. And then it becomes your life, is basically like repairing the hardships that you go through and the emotional stuff that you go through and that you witness, so that you can kind of survive. And it does almost, when I was, practicing as a counselor, it was, I did not handle it healthy. I was going home and I was always on Xanax, and then I was going home and blacking out every single night. So that's how I dealt with it. And then after I wrote this book, or throughout the process of writing this book, towards the end of it, actually, people were like, you should get back into mental health counseling. You should be a counselor again. Like, you should go get your PhD. Like, you should finally do that. And I was faced with a decision there, and I decided instead to go get my education in personal training and fitness and health and wellness coaching. And largely because of the fact that I did not want to go back into that position into people's lives. And so the program that I now do, I actually don't talk about recovery with people, and the trainers that I will potentially be working with, I tell them not to talk about recovery with people, because they have people like Hillary who are on this earth to talk about recovery. I'm here just to talk about their fitness. So all I do is I help them pair things with their recovery with fitness. But then besides that, other than that, I'm just really involved in the fitness aspect of it, which can be a little bit emotionally tolling at the same time. But for me, it's where my heart is passionate. And so I think a lot of times too, like somebody like Hillary, when you find your place where you are passionate, it doesn't take as much energy out of you as it would for somebody else, right? And so sometimes we look at these counselors like, how do they do it? And it's because they have the heart for it. They have the passion burning inside of them. And when you meet them, especially in person, you know that. And that's the way I felt when I met Hillary. I knew that. And I hope that same thing happens to people when they meet me, when it comes to personal training and my health and wellness coaching, is that like, oh wait, this is what he does. Like, this is who he is, this is going to work.
Thank you both so much for being so open and honest with us. And I love your response to other people's story, Mark, that you just use that as more fuel and more passion for your work. And that's a really special thing to have. I think we should probably wrap up. If there's anything that you guys want to end with specifically, you can go ahead. I don't want to keep you too long. Hillary, do you have any last questions? Or Mark, do you have anything you wanted to end with?
I was just gonna. Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I've got to pull mine up.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just gonna say thank you so much, Mark. I'm so appreciative for just us being in each other's lives and how we met, and like how God works, and how God has worked through your life, and just the vulnerability and the level of awareness you have in where you're headed and how your story has brought you here, and that responsibility of sharing this beautiful message. And I'm so excited to be a part of it, and I can't wait to visit you in Florida. And thank you everybody for being here with us.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you so much. And I want to close out this discussion with a prayer that changed my life from a very early stage in my recovery from drugs and alcohol, and kind of it framed the way that I decided to begin walking my life. And instead of, because I had a problem of injecting my will and being like, this is the way I want it, this is the way I see it, this is the way I want it to go. And until I was able to get past that, this book would have never, this is not the way I would have wanted that book to go. I would not want it to be colored with gay colors. I did not want this to expose my deepest, darkest secrets. I did not ever want to come out, I didn't ever want to get clean from drugs and alcohol, until I finally just said, you know what? There is good to be had out there when I pull myself out of it. And not only there is good to be had, but there is wonderful things that happens. There's magical, beautiful, the quake, the ripple effect is just huge. When I saw that, I was like, okay, I don't need to listen to my fears anymore. And that was only through this prayer that really helped me get there. And it's called the Prayer of Saint Francis. And so I just want to read that to you guys for the going away. Prayer of Saint Francis. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek as to be consoled, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen.
Amen.
Man,
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Mark. We so appreciate your time and your talking about your book. And Hillary, thank you for coming. Anyone, I think we're gonna let Mark in there. That was a beautiful ending. And if you do want his book, make sure you can get signed copies from him or from us. Please read it. It's a wonderful book.
And feel free, everybody, just so you know, if you want to contact me, Instagram or Facebook, everything on the internet from Twitter to, I don't know, YouTube's a little different, but everything is Mark A. Turnipseed. There is another Mark Turnipseed out there who has Mark Turnipseed, so I have a little A in there, Mark A. Turnipseed. So if you ever want to reach me, the website, my email address even is Mark A. Turnipseed, and I would love to hear from you.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for making that so accessible to everyone. All right, good night, everyone. Thank you again for your time, our presenters, and thank you for our attendees for being here. We'll see you next time.
love you, Mark.
Love you guys.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks.